And do you want me to say it in Kurdish? So is it Amkated Bash?
We'll do that part. When I cue in with Amkated Bash, Taban Khan, then you'll just respond. We'll do a couple of sentences in Kurdish just because.
Well, I know, but like, wait, don't put me on the spot. I only speak Kurdish with my mum.
Really?
No,
I'm very
Kurdi
surprised.
Dazanam. Kurdi Kambasha.
Oh, your whole lady's coming out now.
Yes.
There we go.
That's the problem. I'm like, don't be bringing no dialects into this, because my Kurdish is a Zalata.
Do you know this in itself is a brilliant clip?
Oh, really?
That little 30 seconds that me and you just had. لا يعني سوراني قصاكي طبعا.
لا كردي مباشا. كردي قصة دكام كردي تيدكام بس للشش صالية ولا ربع. So my Kurdish is so it takes a little bit from Suli, it takes a little bit from Holir, it takes a little bit from Duhok, it takes a little bit from Koya, Kerk. I did all of them.
All of your experiences.
But I don't even understand that I don't know that I'm doing it because I just speak it how I've always spoken it.
Oh, okay, so you mix up all the different
dialects.
Yeah,
everyone.
Nice.
I don't know that I'm doing it though. That's the problem. So my dialect it doesn't have an origin. It's completely mixed. So there's a little bit of Holeri.
It's the Taban dialect.
That's it. It's Tinglish.
There we go. I love it.
It really is. But that's most probably why you won't really catch me speaking Kurdish. I can speak Kurdish. I speak Kurdish at home with my family.
Understood. On that note, Taban, Amkated Bash.
Amkated Bashtir.
Zor spas.
Hoş bir spas.
Thank you for making time to do this. What's probably going to be an amazing podcast, I have no doubt, in all honesty.
Thank you.
You have
really excited.
A great story to tell. And more importantly for me, it's a brilliant Kurdish story. So this was my leading message to you. If you remember, I said, Taban, us Kurds are underrepresented.
Yeah.
So it's a great deal for me to have someone on you like here that I can share with my audience, which is over 90% non-Kurdish.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at who I have here making a difference in the world.
Oh,
with
thank
her,
you.
Mate, embrace it.
Thank you. I really
You've just begun. That's the crazy thing.
I genuinely believe that Kurds just need to unite. Like, honestly, we all need to kind of get together and really support each other and have each other's backs. For me, especially with the Lotus Flower, I try and encourage as much men to be involved in it as possible. I try and support Kurdish businesses, Kurdish women. Like, for me, it's a really, really big thing. It's my way of giving back to the community. So
the Lotus Flower does center around empowering and saving women from struggles, and struggles like war, abusive marriages, a lack of education. But your emphasis to get the men involved, that's more of a cultural shift, isn't it? You want to see a society that collectively helps women progress and not just women helping women progress. Yeah, am I right in that?
So I kind of say yes. I think for me, every society, not just Kurdish society, we need to see women and girls being able to thrive, feel safe, have opportunities to do the best that they can. I think for me, because I'm Kurdish and my Kurdish background, I'm very passionate about supporting my motherland, basically. Cool. And that entails everyone, right? I have a son. I've got a 21-year-old son. If I don't really think about including the men and boys, then where does that kind of leave the future generation? So for me, it's really important to include men and boys in supporting women and girls.
Now, I understand your point wholeheartedly because unfortunately, my parents did actually divorce and I'm predominantly been raised by my mother. So I've probably got a different upbringing from a Kurdish perspective and my views on women than a typical one. For good or for worse, that's not what we're here to discuss. But I'm emphasizing with your point. I think these days society is quite divided. And if you go too deeply into this rabbit hole of social media, you'll start thinking we all just hate each other. When the truth is, one can't really exist without the other, like even our instincts.
Yeah, I think you definitely need a community to support each other. And for me, like, I try and bring my son up in a way where he's very connected with his emotions. He's very empathetic. He's very sensitive. I'd say lots of things that we kind of grow up trying to tell boys not to be. But for me, it's very important. And I think that there are so many great men and boys in our region. We just need to kind of show them or provide ways and show them how they can support and how they can help. I mean, the Lotus Flower, it's a 50-50 gender split. We've got so many amazing men working in our organization, and they're genuinely, passionately working there. It's not just like it's a job. Everyone's really, really committed to the cause. And I think they're a great example of how men can be supporting women and girls.
But the overall goal is to get more men involved in more than just a way of working. For men to understand that the way they speak, behave, and represent themselves around women has a big impact on them.
Massively, massively. And I think for me, it starts from a young age. So that's why I'm keen to kind of work with boys as they're developing those ideas about how they see women and girls in our culture. And I think it's really important for us to start at quite a young age and kind of include them and start bringing them in to the change. I think it's a collective thing. You can't do it in isolation.
No, you can't. You definitely can't. And if it isn't collective and society or as a culture, we don't spread the same message, then you get mixed signals and it goes through one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where to hear it from. But in your case, as a mother to a child, to a fully grown adult son now, he would have heard these stories for years and it would be embedded in him, and he's acting more the way you want rather than, let's say, a typical person from the culture.
Yes, he's I'd say he does, but also at that age, so much influenced by outside factors I can't control. I've got no control over that. So for me, with the boys and men that we work with, it's more like, how can we be that outside control that makes them have some sort of, I mean, I've got examples of some projects which were, I'd say, quite innovative, but also very inclusive and understanding of the culture. And that one is a positive masculinity project. Now, trying to implement that in our region, I saw the look on your eye. It's quite hard, but I know that a lot of the men and boys that we were working with quite religious. It doesn't matter which religion. So it could be Yazidi, it could be Muslim, it could be Christian, any religion, but they do look up to the religion and the religious leaders. So what we did was we actually got the religious leaders involved. So we went to them and asked. So we had one from the Yazidi community. We had one from Sunni. So we had a mullah. We had someone from the Christian community, so a priest. And we asked them questions. We asked them questions around, gender-based violence. Are men allowed to hit women? Like, does it say that in the Holy Book? Are they allowed to be educated? Are they entitled to an education? Are they entitled to, being treated fairly? When we asked them those questions, they had to answer according to their scripture. And you found that actually a lot of the scriptures were quite supportive of women. But a lot of men, not just in our society, in many societies, use religion as a scapegoat. And so for me, it was important, like before every positive masculinity project, where we had a male trainer to run the sessions, we would play that video. So there was no things around, oh, it's because it's in the religion. So there'd be no scapegoating of the religion. So we've kind of cut that off from the start. And as that project progressed, they actually asked for mental health support. And this is where our Men and Boys Trauma Project was born out. So the men eventually said, no, we need mental health support. We're almost taking it out on our partners or our family members. So from that, the Men and Boys Trauma Project was born. And when we gave them mental health support, we actually saw a reduction of gender-based violence within that community that we were targeting and working with. It all goes hand in hand.
Is this a part of, is it therapy abroad?
No, this is the Lotus Flower.
Okay.
This is the Lotus Flower.
So, number one, I think, I want to say I know, but then I sound a bit arrogant of my opinion. So let me humbly say I think. But anyone with half a brain will understand what I'm saying. The fact of the matter is, scriptures, ideologies, laws are often manipulated for control, whether that's of a woman or of a class. We live in the UK. We know how things have been manipulated in the last couple of years through government. We're Kurdish. We understand the ramifications of certain habits that males had picked up over years and repeated those traumatic cycles. Religions and organizations are often something where you must bring in unification for it to work. So it would be near to stupid for Christianity or Islam or the Yazidi religion to be like, yeah, batter your women. Because that's like saying we're diminishing half our supporters. Some people take religion as gospel and the word of God, like I do, and some would just say it's a collective thing to bring people together. Whichever one it is, you don't bring people together by saying you can batter the other half, right? My point being, it's people that diminish the qualities that these organizations or establishments or religions try to have. I was pleasantly surprised when you said young men in Kurdistan accepted therapy or asked for therapy. Wow, it's hard enough getting people to do that in this country that's considered more progressive. And how quickly they realized that their words and actions were affecting the women around them. That also caught me off guard. You got some brilliant teachers over there. You're doing something right, Taban.
Yeah, I think
you're doing something right. Okay, you thought?
Yeah, no. So for me, we listen. We listen to them. And actually, what we realized is there's not a lot of education around mental health. So when someone's going through something, they don't understand what they're going through. They don't know. They're just reacting with the symptoms and the reactions. And those are some of the symptoms that we saw within this particular group that we were supporting. If we could do it on a wider basis, we'd be able to tell if it's going to have bigger impact. But with the group that we were working on, the target group, there was a clear reduction in gender-based violence, a very, very clear reduction. And that was because the men were provided with mental health support.
How did you measure that metric? I'm a bit like, how did you, from month A to month 6?
We do feedbacks, we do case studies, we do evaluations.
Without trying to sound condescending or disrespectful, how did you know that there was validity in what you were getting back?
I think, so the group of women that we worked with before working with the men, we asked them, how can we help? What can we do to support? What ways can we support? And their feedback was, well, if you really want to support and to reduce this, then you need to speak to our men and boys. That's how it came about. So obviously in our feedback and our evaluation, not only do we go back to the women and ask them, but we ask the men as well. You say valid, if it was valid, we've got qualified therapists, like you can see the change.
I meant, so there's metrics to measuring data.
Yeah.
And it's hard to measure, for example, how many times did this week did you get into an altercation with your husband, and how much of that has decreased? How much of that do you think was to do with therapy? That's all I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
it could be that really they have 2 arguments a week and it went to 1 or it went to 0. I'm just saying, how
Yeah.
did you measure that? Because you can't be in their lives directly.
No, we have particular ways.
But there's trust.
Yeah.
I'm sensing trust.
Yeah, there's a particular, I mean, we have an M&E department, which is monitoring and evaluation, and they have particular sets of ways of monitoring and doing evaluations. But with us and the community, there's a deep, deep trust. There's a deep trust. There's a deep respect. We're one of the organizations that have stayed around. Like, they've seen us in the camps for 7 years now. So we haven't just started something and left, which is what most organizations do, is they implement a project for about a year and then they go. They've seen us around. They trust us with projects like Boxing Sisters. It's a deep trust and deep respect, but also they know that we're not going in to change their culture. And I think this is really important. This is really important. And one thing that I think most NGOs get wrong is that they go into a society or a region wanting to change something. Of course, we want to change and certain things.
You want to make it better.
We want to make it better, but we don't want to change the culture.
No, because that's too much change. One thing about change is you should always preach change, but never implement it too fast.
No,
because
yeah.
people get defensive.
Yeah.
So if factor A was bad, get rid of factor A too quickly, and you very much quickly become factor nothing.
Yeah.
And it probably helps that you're Kurdish yourself. It probably helps that they look at you with the mindset of, oh, she came back from Europe. Oh, maybe she is a bit more progressive. I don't know if they ever took that into account.
Well, it's hard. It's really difficult for someone like me. You'd think it would be easy because I'm Kurdish, but actually, if you're Kurdish that's been brought up in a Western society, you are kind of almost tarnished with the brush of, oh, she's been westernized.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, I have been westernized, but I am also very proud of my roots. I love my Kurdish nationality, and I respect the way people lead their lives. And if we want change to happen, then we work with the society. We work with them, alongside them. We don't try and make them change. And this is what people miss, is that you have to figure out how to work with the community, in the community, and help them make the change, not for you to go in and change stuff. That's why I only hire locally. Right.
So you want to rub shoulders with the locals rather than come in and replace, because then you almost look like you're some dictatorship. Someone came in and said, I don't like what you're doing here. Let me just change it.
All my staff are local. Every single one in Kurdistan are local.
Where are you based? What region?
So at the moment we have projects in Duhok. So it's mainly around Duhok or Duhok Governorate. So we kind of go into other parts. But it depends on the project. Our office is in Duhok.
How are you finding the dialect? It's a side point, I know, but as Soranis, yes, Badini can be quite difficult for us Soranis, right?
Yeah, I never understood one word, but now I understand it, and it's so nice because I've seen my progression, and I try and speak. I call everyone Seda, which is, I think it's Mamosta.
I think there's another one that's called Bismam.
Yeah. Like, Bismam. I think my Badini has improved. I definitely understand a lot more, which is lovely.
No, of course. So something that me and you touched on as we were just talking before the podcast was the generational trauma that unfortunately Kurds have had to go through, because it feels like as Kurdish people, for the longest time, we've just had to fight for freedom, for a seat at the table, for some recognition, for some respect. And this creates a culture that might not trust too much, might not get along too well. points fingers about which political party is making the mistakes, rather than seeing the bigger picture and realizing that in politics, you're only as powerful as your allies. And sadly, we don't seem to have that many allies. Were you around for the referendum? Were you in Kurdistan?
No, I was here.
Did you see how quickly the surrounding countries shut it down?
Of course.
How sad that was. Yeah. But it goes to show, like in politics, you're only as powerful as your allies.
Yeah.
And my point is, all of this trauma, we as young Kurds being raised by a generation of Peshmergas.
Yeah.
That impacts you. And you said women carry the trauma. Explain that point again, because it was so wow.
Yeah. I think, so there's two parts to this, I'd say. First part is, sometimes I feel like being a Kurd or our Kurdish identity is like one of those dreams where you scream and no voice comes out. You're literally just screaming and screaming and there's no voice coming out and nobody can hear you. Or you're running and running and there's something behind you but you don't know what. So it's almost as if we're there, we're present, but we're not allowed to be seen and heard.
I mean, that's actually true though.
Yeah.
I mean, in
that's
Turkey,
a reality.
Up until very recently, in the last decade or two, it was forbidden to be teaching Kurdish in schools. We all know what Saddam Hussein put people through. We'll get on your story later on. The Iranian regime is not nice to Kurds. I mean, wow, we've got our back against the wall.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we've had to grow up with. We were born into. And for me, generational trauma, like the way that I was thinking about it is when a mother carries a child, the trauma that mother carries is passed down to the child. So the child is already born with trauma. And then if you go back, if you're kind of going backwards, you go, oh, what about, so the mother is carrying their mother's trauma, which is being passed. And then you go back down to all the lineage and you realize there's a lot of trauma that's being passed down before you've even started living your own trauma. So that for Kurds is so intense. Like we've got generational trauma so badly, and paired with that, there's no understanding of mental health. There's lack of access. There's a stigma around it. So you're naturally going to get a recipe where things won't be right.
Yeah, 100%. And me and you were, again, talking about this before we started recording. We were raised by a generation of people that never had time to stop and focus on their mental health. It wasn't a possibility. The vast majority of Kurdish people come from very humble beginnings. They don't have much. And then on top of that, they've probably been through at least one war, some people two. So you have the Iraq and Iran war. You have the direct attack of Saddam Hussein on the Kurdish people. You have Arabic Iraqi officials roaming the streets of Kurdistan like it was their own. There was a period like that, where there was so much of a Iraqi control inside Kurdistan that their generals and officers were all over the place, and they would walk around untouched, even though there was an active resistance against them, but the resistance was in the mountains. And that is true, right? They were amongst us in the cities. And
when my mum worked, there was secret police in her workplace. Right. So she'd get interrogated constantly.
And they're not quite secret because we know that,
we call them secret police, but they weren't a secret, they were just, what would you call them now? Undercover cops or something?
I mean, I think they were out with their chest out. They were confident. Yeah. I don't think, mate, the Donny's back in the ground somewhere, but I don't think Saddam Hussein ever thought he was going to lose that war, if we're being completely honest. Because he came across, so this is the power of heart and resistance, right? Regular, untrained, everyday people, like your father, picked up a gun and decided to defend their family in their homeland. This guy had a military. Yeah, there's something to be said all over the world in conflicts like this about people who just get up and their cause is their survival and their identity. So we've mentioned the struggles of Kurdish identity, both of us growing up in this country and not knowing whether or not we describe ourselves as Iraqi or Kurdish, right?
Yeah.
So where would you like to see, I know it's a broad question, Kurdish identity or representation in 20, 30 years?
I think for me, I'm slowly starting to see it. Like, I've got so many people around me that are such talented Kurdish people, and they flourished in their area. And when somebody turns around and says, that person is Kurdish, I feel so much pride in that. I'm like, yeah, I'm Kurdish too. They're Kurdish. They're Kurdish. So for me, I think it's already happening. And I do believe if we thrive in all our different areas, everyone in different areas, we carry our identity with us anyway. So that identity is going to come with you. You are Kurdish. It's coming with you. So the moment that you thrive in your area, I think that's how we start really, really uniting as Kurds to be represented.
You know, on Sunday, I went to meet Serbaz Berzinci. Do you know who he is?
I've heard, yeah.
He's the mayor of Lambeth now.
Oh, really?
Yes, Kurdish mayor
Yeah.
in the UK, probably the first ever.
See, there you go.
I actually asked him to be on the podcast.
Oh.
I genuinely did. It was very busy. The place was packed out. Of course, everyone wanted to see him. It was at my local mosque in Manchester. It was a Kurdish one.
Brilliant.
So we're working on getting him on. And look, I think his schedule is probably a bit too hectic for it, but it was a proud moment.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why as Kurds we get super excited that I met Taban or I met Lazo or I met Serbaz is, dude, there's so few of us. And think about it, when we come to this country as first generation immigrants, our parents especially, they don't have the time to thrive. They have to survive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I did some research for immigration and diaspora about a year ago when I did my podcast Diaspora and Climate Migration with Dr. Bamonori. And a trend that I saw was that more people actually move away from their homeland for money rather than freedom. And we often think that when we leave the Middle East or certain countries outside the West, we're running for freedom. Actually, it's for money and survival sometimes. And it's because there can be lack of opportunities where we're from. So we, as the second generation, are the ones that have to step up and say, this is what it means to be Kurdish. This is my identity that I want to share with you, be it through a charity or through a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And because I think our parents did what they could bringing us here.
Yeah.
And their backs already hurt from carrying that load.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's on us to be able to support other Kurds to thrive. From that mentality of survival, there's also a fear sometimes of people there's scarcity and there's not enough space for me. I can't shine in this particular area or I can't do that. That we need to kind of remove by inviting people, by lifting other people up, by kind of going, okay, I'm really proud of you. How can I help you? What can I do? Is there a way that I can support you? How can I make you better? Like, we need more of that to allow us to thrive as well.
Help one another.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. In every facet and walk of life, we need to, one thing about mental health that I always say, and I don't want to come across as harsh, the most important thing for mental health is a very simple rule. Be nicer to people. And I mean that in the strictest way.
Yeah.
Just be nicer to people in your everyday interactions, and you could be the reason why someone had one less negative thought.
Yeah.
Because I'm slightly tired of seeing a society caught up on the big macro things on how to fix mental health. What about the small micro things? What's my mood like when I go to work? What was my mood like when I came to see Taban this morning? These things have a bigger impact on you than the books you read or the quotes you read online. And I think it's also the hardest thing to master, because peace to those who smile even when their hearts are in pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've a lot of experience of that.
Yeah, you have
But
a
I
lot
think
of lived experience. of that.
yeah, I think for me it's so important to just treat people with respect. Like from the cleaner to the driver to the project manager to the regional director, I treat them all the same. Like for me, it's so important to really respect people as people and humans with a heart. So that's my number one rule in kind of interacting with other people. And I think it gets you a long way. Really does.
I have a very simple rule. Those who want respect, give respect. Do you know?
Those who want respect, give respect. Yeah, that's it.
I mean,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised how much easier life is. How many more doors open just because you smiled and you were a bit nicer to talk to.
Yeah.
I've often said that, and I said it to you earlier in a few hours, like, okay, I might be an architect. I might have all these different skills that I've worked really hard for over the years. I wasn't just born with them, right? But my best ability is probably my social ability to, like you said, we can be like chameleons and blend into every room, because that means that with that ability to blend in and feel normal in every setting, we also make other people feel comfortable. We also make other people feel loved and supported. I think that's a big one. And not everyone can be an absolute social butterfly like Taban, maybe, but you know what I'm trying to say?
Well, would you believe me if you, I mean,
Oh no, you
I
definitely weren't always like this.
I weren't always like this.
Well, neither was I.
I still have social anxiety.
Yeah.
I still like struggle sometimes in social situations. I'm they say, are you an extrovert or an introvert? I'm both. Like sometimes I just need to go back in my shell and recharge and be alone and not be around people. But that's okay. So I think for me, I've accepted that I don't have to be something or a particular way all the time. Push myself outside of my comfort zone because I need to do something and something is bigger than me. So for me, it's, fundraising for the projects that we do for the Lotus Flower. Like sometimes I have to do stuff where I wouldn't feel comfortable in that situation, but I push myself outside of that boundary because I'm doing it for the women and girls.
Yes.
So it's beyond you.
For something that you believe is bigger than you.
Yeah.
For people who need more help than you.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, because you've had a lot of challenges. And there is this one particular point which I'm going to leave for later. But it was something I noticed about you and I absolutely adored. Because it was a major, major, major sign of strength. But in order to set that line up, I need you to tell everyone about your unfortunate struggles and your survival of genocide when you were a child.
So going back to my childhood story. Okay, so the best way to kind of go into it is firstly to describe I'm Kurdish. And
just in case they missed that throughout the podcast.
Just in case they missed that one. My dad was a Peshmerga.
A freedom fighter.
My dad was a Peshmerga, a freedom fighter. He was also a poet. His poetry was quite political. So it would invoke people to uprise and go be part of the cause. So for him, we are the reason why he is the reason why Saddam Hussein took us to prison. So I went to prison with my grandparents, so my dad's parents and my mother. And the reason why we ended up in prison is because they actually wanted to capture my dad. So they were after my dad. And so the way that they would normally try and capture these men was by capturing the families to get as much information out of them as possible.
Almost like hostages.
Yeah, basically. So they're hoping that the men would find out and they would try and come and free the families, and then they would take the men. But then they would take the men and the families.
See, I am from just the generation after you. So I haven't seen this directly, but from what's been described to me and what I heard about your story as well, is that when Taban says they would come after the families, she means literally right at home.
Yeah.
You would be at home.
Yeah.
And they would run upon your house and they have targeted you. So that's how much control they used to have in our regions.
And to take it one step further, so when I said that there was police in my mum's workplace, and, my mum would sometimes take time off to go and see my dad in the mountains secretly. And whenever she took time off, the next day, she would be interrogated by the police. So this happened several times, and she just didn't want to go through it anymore. So she left work. And the day after she left work, they turned up at my grandmother's house to take her in for questioning. So it's almost as if, they were suspicious of why she'd left work. And so they wanted to find out more. So as soon as she left work, they turned up the next day, and I was playing in the garden.
How old were you?
I was 4. So I was playing in the garden, and my uncle came out to open the door, and I ran to him for safety, and he opened the door, and they looked down at me, and as Kurds, all Kurds knew what was going on.
Yes. Well, not 4-year-old Taban.
I didn't. And they were very, very clearly I didn't. But the adults all knew. So they would always be figuring out a way to come out of a situation. And this is what happened in that particular instance. When my uncle opened the door, he saw the soldiers and went, okay, his brain must have gone, I need to think of something to deter them. So he said, she's left him, meaning my mum has left my dad, because of this child, and patted me on the head. And they looked down at me and said, so this is the enemy's child.
Did they use the exact word?
Yeah. So this is the enemy's child. They said it in Arabic, so I don't know what the exact words are in Arabic. And it was at that point that he realized, what have I done? I've now revealed that this is the child. And from there, that he couldn't go back because they asked for divorce papers. And because it was a made up story, it wasn't real. So my mum had to go in for questioning, and then they took me with her, and my grandparents were in the car when we went in the car. We were taken to a first prison, which is, I always say it's like a main prison because there was like normal criminals there.
Sorry, I have to step in. Your uncle was left there?
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Because didn't they have a thing where they would go after the young adults, the men? So my uncle on my mum's side. So there wasn't any direct relation to my dad. No, I understand, but, and maybe you can confirm this, but there was a thing with the troops ordered by Saddam Hussein. They would just go after able-bodied young men because they could be a part of the resistance. So I suppose that's not what they were there for on that day, or am I just off here?
I've had experience of that. We when we were in one of the cars, there was an 18-year-old boy that was brought up into the car, but it's more people that were politically involved. Right. Like, let's get that right.
So they had their targets.
Yeah,
basically.
They had their targets, and my mum's side of the family weren't on the target list. My dad was on the target list. Like, he alone was very much so. And the way to get him was to get the family. My older brother was hidden. So when my other uncles found out that they discovered that I was the daughter, they instantly went and hid my older brother in the house so they wouldn't take him. But they really just wanted my mum for questioning, and they took me as extra. And it was my dad's parents that were caught. So it was mainly centered around my dad, because he was a Peshmerga and a poet. So for them, he had a gun and a pen.
And then this leads to the prison.
So we went to the prison, and they interrogated the adult for hours, asked them lots of questions to try and get information out of them to reveal where my dad was. My grandparents, my mum, didn't give anything away. So they took us to another car, and in that car, halfway through, they picked up an 18-year-old boy who was blindfolded. And he kept screaming, "Please don't kill me. What are you going to do to me? Please don't kill me." And my granddad was trying to console him. So there were, a lot of young, especially young boys, taken and killed. So yes, that is partly true. But I don't really know why my uncles would have stayed safe. But I think in that particular instance, they were so focused on taking my mum. But I also remember that they were told not to follow, otherwise they'd be shot instantly on the spot. So they weren't allowed to follow the car when they were all crying and when they took us. Anyway, let's get back to the car. So the car and this 18-year-old boy, but they took him off and we never saw him again. So they would have executed him 100%. And then we were taken to the prison, and my granddad was separated from me. So he went to the men's quarters, and my grandmother, my mother, and myself, we all went to the women's quarters. And some women had been there for months and months. And so they'd become very territorial, like, this is my space, there's no space here, we can't have any space. So it's quite aggressive. And we stayed in that prison for about 2 to 3 weeks. I remember not eating. I hated the smell of the open toilet. And I just, even now, if I walk past a particular place and it has that smell, I'm instantly taken back. And that's the reason why I just could not eat. I remember that very clearly. And after that time, some family names were called out and ours was on the list. I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I'm a 4-year-old just following the adults. And it's when the adults went outside and they started screaming. In our culture, they wail and they hit themselves, and all of that happened. And when I say it in English, they cried and wailed, it doesn't really visualize what actually happens.
It doesn't do it justice. So if you're watching on YouTube, look at my hand gestures. If you're listening on a different platform, just imagine this. They will raise their hands and very strongly whack it on their legs.
Their legs,
repeatedly do this. And they will slap themselves on the face.
Yeah.
And they might even pull their hair. And they will be screaming as they're doing this. Yeah. They're praying.
Yeah.
They're calling out the names of their loved ones, of their God. Yeah, that always kind of used to scare me, because as a child, I learned to associate that with something going wrong. Of course, no one ever does that when they're happy.
Yeah.
And in your case, even though you were young, you picked up on it as well, because they were planning to bury you and many other people during it.
Yeah. I think my cue as a child was when I witnessed the adults kind of crying, screaming, wailing, and doing all of that, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what, but they'd seen the diggers, so they knew what the diggers were for. They knew that our life was about to end and we were going to be buried alive. And I didn't understand that, but I could tell that something really dangerous was happening. And I just knew to be quiet. That's all I remember, was just be quiet. This is no time to be a child. You just need to be quiet and invisible. But when they were taken onto the buses, all that screaming and it was all prayers, reciting the Quran. Saying all the prayers under your breath quietly. So it was all silent, but you could hear people whispering prayers. Like every single person was whispering prayers. And that was a sign of, okay, we're going to die. The only thing we've got left is God. So we'll just pray before we die. That's a really surreal moment of switch, because you're going from one extreme to another.
It's acceptance.
Yeah, it was acceptance, but as a child, I didn't know what it was.
Well, this is what we referred to earlier, and I said, is ignorance bliss? And you said, yes, but it comes out later. And that's true. There's something about emotions. It's not created, it has to go somewhere. So if Taban at 4 years old starts to feel a trauma that her brain can't comprehend, it will stay there until her brain can comprehend it. And that might be in her adult life. And that might come out in many ways. Same goes for an anger or sadness. So this is going to sound weird. I've always felt like it's harder to deal with your emotions as men because men can't cry as readily. Does that make sense? So women...
We're taught to not cry because, men are taught not to cry.
Exactly. Yeah. But crying has a certain stress relief about it. And this is probably one of the many reasons why women live longer, or women can be more open about their mental health issues. It's kind of crazy how your primary socialization has such an impact on you, even in your mid-20s or mid-30s.
It does.
That small things that I have been taught about what men can and cannot do, I'm still not able to unlearn at my big age. And it's very strange.
It takes time. And it takes a lot of healing and learning and unlearning and relearning to really get to a place of understanding and accepting.
It's a roller coaster journey that never really seems to get any easier. You learn how to take the blows a bit more, You
have the tools. So for me, I think the way that happiness is projected, like, happiness is a destination that you reach. I don't think that's true. I think it's a choice. You're not going to be happy all the time. Like, let's just accept that it's not possible to be happy every single time.
You can't be anything at any given time. I can't always be angry. I can't always be sad. I can't always be happy. I can't always be awake, for example.
Yeah. But it's the tools. It's the tools that you have and the tools that you develop to help you get in and out of states. And it's the same, I'd say, with like the healing journey and the blows. Like, for example, so many people say to me, oh, how do you bounce back? Like, after one trauma after another, like, how do you bounce back? And my thing is, I've just developed tools and I know which tools to take out of my pocket to help me bounce back in that particular scenario. That's all it is. It's tools that you carry with you.
Those tools also relate to a certain mentality. I think one thing that I've realized amongst people who tend to live better is that, and I like to talk about myself in this way as well, those that can regulate their emotions and their actions to the best of their ability, we all make mistakes, know how to live better at moments of happiness or moments of stress. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So some people get overwhelmed very quickly and others navigate and understand that, look, this right now is the balance of, it's my wave coming down, right? This is my peak in life and it's coming down, and I have to realize that in order to create my next wave of happiness, I have to accept that this one's coming down. So that's what it is. Some people know how to live better in good or bad times because they've associated their mentality to their happiness, rather than, in order for me to be happy, I must be happy. In order for me to be happy, I must have product A and B and C. And there's a level of perspective, but also happiness, like anything else in life, is earned, right? Taban, if you were happy 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week, a month, would you actually be happy?
I think for me, it's not possible to be. I think all emotions are very valid and you need different emotions at different times. And the reality is, everything's temporary. Nothing's permanent. Nothing is ever permanent. Every single thing around you is temporary. And so are emotions. So that's how I kind of see it. But I can do stuff that make me happy. For example, my job and, being of service to others
even
and helping.
Things. If you're on YouTube right now, look at these amazing, what would we call these?
They're like rugs. like rugs that are made in.
But they're for decorations. They're
decorative.
decorative.
They're actual rugs.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
But you're using them as decorative. Nice.
No, we're gonna eventually sell them. But yeah, so it's everything has a purpose, and everything. If you're lucky enough to find something that makes you happy through purpose and service, then I can't think of anything better personally. I love how rewarding my work is because I know that I'm genuinely changing lives, and that for me is really important. It's not just a number. Like, we know these people. How many charities can go around saying we know these people? We know who we're supporting. We know who we're working with. When I go back to Kurdistan, I mean, I have people that I've never met in my life coming up to me saying, "Hi, Ms. Taban, I'm part of your Peace Sisters or Peace Brothers project. I love that project." I'm there going, wow.
Is it surreal almost?
It really is. It's happened a few times, but it's so nice to know when they turn around and say, "We love that project. Please, can you implement it again?"
Me and you love to go off on tangents. Let's talk about your eventfully miraculous escape of this bus, which you thought was taking you to your grave.
Yeah. So so the buses started driving, and halfway through driving, the buses stopped, and some sort of deal must have been made outside because there was a few more people. Something was happening. We didn't know what. But like now I know at that time you had Kurdish people working for Saddam Hussein, but they were actually working for Kurds to rescue them in situations like this. But then you also had Kurdish people who were working for Saddam Hussein for real. We've had experiences of both. And so in that particular bus experience, the drivers had switched. And when the buses drove on and they stopped and the doors opened, the drivers said, "We're Kurdish, we're not going to kill you, but you need to disappear as if you're dead." So they'd come to rescue us. And we don't know how it came about. You know, somebody must have heard that our group was going to be killed. So somebody must have intercepted somehow. And in those days, you had underground radios to communicate. You didn't even have, or letters. There's no internet. There's no mobile phones. There's none of that to kind of communicate. So they rescued us, and we basically were let go, and we walked to like a road. We found the roadside, and my granddad stopped a taxi, which happened to be one of his former students because he was a teacher. And so he was really confused and went, "What are you doing here in the middle of nowhere with your family?" And he said, "Don't ask any questions. Just drive us back into the city. No questions. You just need to sneak us back in, and that's your job." So we were taken to my mum's stepsister's house because it's the least likely place that they would look. And when we walked in, they were all wearing black, and they were mourning because they'd heard that we'd been killed or buried alive. So for them, that's the news that had gone back. They didn't realize that we'd been rescued. So when we walked in, obviously they were very shocked. But my dad had somehow sent a message to say that my mum and myself needed to leave and we need to go in hiding and not stay in the city. So that's when we were taken to the south of Iraq, where I had a step uncle in Diwania. Because I was Kurdish and 4 years old, I only spoke Kurdish. And so that would have given us away. So we stayed indoors for about 3 months. And then my mum finally put her foot down and said to my dad, "I'm not killing myself or my kids for you. You need to get us out of this country. How are we going to go to safety?" So it took a while for them to kind of figure that out. But remember, this is during the Iran and Iraq war. So in the rural areas, they were all being bombed by Iran. But then the cities weren't safe for us because Saddam Hussein was targeting us. So we had to take the risk of going from village to village in hiding in the villages. So there'd be like bombardments and bombs for weeks. Sometimes we'd be the only family stuck in a village with a group of fighters. And that went on for about 12 months. And then eventually we were smuggled into Iran for safety. And my dad was meant to meet us there. And a Kurdish husband and wife, were hired by Saddam Hussein to poison a group of men. And my dad was included in that. And so when they laid out the feast for everyone to eat, the men that drank mastal, which is a yogurt drink for those that don't know, the poison was in there. So the men that gulped it down died on the spot. And after like 2 died, they were like, okay, we've been poisoned. And my dad was critically poisoned with 2 other men. And when they were smuggled into Iran, a day later, Amnesty International picked up on the story. And so Amnesty International flew my dad to the UK to get medical treatment with one of the guys, and then the other guy was flown to France. So, and then we had to wait for him to survive before we could come here. So we came here. He came here in 87, and we came here in 88, and I was 6 by that point.
And then the new chapter in England for Taban starts.
Yeah. Yeah. As a refugee, I mean, you arrive here as a child refugee. But also remembering, like, we forget, you've left behind everyone that you know and love.
All your core memories and values
it's just gone. But family, like for us, you know, family is really, really important. And we were brought up more or less by our extended family because my dad was always in the mountains fighting. We never really knew what it felt like to be a nuclear family. We'd never experienced my dad being around because he was always fighting, always. So we were brought up by our extended family, so our uncles, aunts, grandparents, and the house was always full of family, cousins. Like we were used to that. To suddenly go from that to being in a strange country where everything looked different. There was no greenery. Everything looked different. The weather,
people, the colour of their hair, the colour of their eyes.
Everything was different. We'd only seen Kurdish people. So just arriving here and it was so different, but also very isolating and very strange because we were a nuclear family for the first time. We were 4 people.
It's a different lifestyle as well. So in Kurdistan and many places in the Middle East, there's a very family-tied influence. Whereas England has a very capitalistic 9-to-5 system. And it's harder to see extended family because of the way people work. And it's very different, isn't it? Yeah. I have a similar experience in the sense that when I came here, it was the same thing. I no longer am running around with my aunties or cousins I'm an only child. And I am the only child in the whole family.
Oh, yeah.
All my other cousins have multiple siblings on both sides. So I must have over 40 cousins. And because most of my life was spent here, I never really got to know anybody.
Experience that. And it's really hard. That is quite isolating. You know, we didn't grow up with any cousins as well. I think obviously our family circle has grown here over time. And so for my son, he is an only child as well, but he's been fortunate enough to have cousins around him his own age. And that is something that I'm really grateful for because it's something that we didn't have.
In a way, you were pretty much raised Western and English, but holding on to your roots. Well, actually, no. Explain that to me. Because I would imagine...
No, I would say I was raised with very patriotic Kurdish family with an open mind.
Wait, of course, yes, at home. But I meant society. And this is something I would consider a bit of a culture clash. Because for people like me and you growing up, we get told one thing at home and another at school, one thing by our parents, another by our friends. So how did Taban navigate that?
It was very hard. I have to say, my parents were quite open-minded. My dad was pretty open-minded. My mum was open-minded. We were always taught to take 50% of the good from this culture and 50% of the good of our own culture. Because, there's only 50% of every culture that's good. You can't get 100% that's good. There's always going to be some. So we were like 50-50. You'll make a great combination together. We had to speak Kurdish at home. When I say I don't speak Kurdish in public places, but I speak fluent Kurdish. And for someone who came here at the age of 6, you'll be quite shocked at how much Kurdish I know. A whole family speaks Kurdish. My son speaks Kurdish. We've made it a rule to make sure that our children and we carry on our language and understand and speak it. So that's been really important. And everyone's been involved in certain things their own way to keep our identity alive and our culture. And for me, it is working through the Lotus Flower. That's been a big thing, is to be connected. I've always said, given that I survived death so many times, what can I do to give back, but also be connected to my motherland? And that's the bridge for me.
I know you started this from scratch, on your own. But what was your catalyst? What was your activation? When was the Lotus Flower actually born? So not when it flourished. When did you plant that seed?
Oh, well, when I came back after experiencing what I experienced from ISIS, so I'd gone back in 2014.
And you have some crazy stories of that as well. You literally went into a war zone.
I flew over ISIS and rescued people and delivered aid in the height of ISIS. Like literally but that was my first day at work.
Can you?
You're going to have to show the video. We can share the video with them.
We're going to share the video, but I need you all to just take in what this amazing person just said to you. Her first day of work was saving people from an Islamic terror state.
Basically.
Sometimes when something happens and you're like, I can't match this. No, it's not happening.
It just happens. And I'm like...
And I get it. You were in that position to do that job. I'm not saying other people wouldn't want to do that. But still, you made active plans in your mind to help people, which it's like, I know where I'm going, and what comes with it is a result of where I chose to go, and you chose to help people. And that's why you have these incredible stories. And like you always say, lived experience.
Now that you put it like that, completely. For me, spending the 15 months out there, being so direct and on the ground and helping through so many of the activities with the foundation that I work for then, when I came back to the UK, I couldn't go back to a normal 9 to 5. I couldn't. I physically could not. And I remember I went for job interviews where normally I would go through with flying colours. I've never failed an interview in my life, and I just knew I'd get the job. But I walked into 2 particular, and where you say when, I've still got the photo. I had 2 job interviews. One of them I walked in, and I won't name the organisations because of reasons. I walked in, I could see people just standing around drinking coffee and tea, and I'm there going, do you realise what's going on in the world? And you're standing here. What are you doing? So I'd already gone into the interview with the mindset of, I don't want this job. What can I do to make me not get it? That's how I delivered my interview. And the next one was exactly the same. But before that, I'd said to myself, if I don't get this job, then this is God's way of telling me you need to do the Lotus Flower. After that meeting, I met my friend and I said to him, take a photo of this because this is the start of the Lotus Flower. This organisation is going to be one of the greatest partners of Lotus Flower.
Do you have that photo?
I do.
I need that photo.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
And it was after that, it was born.
But you see, okay, so there are coincidences, there are, let's say, accidents in life, and we're not here to argue that. But there's also the mentality of, I want to help people, And this is what I meant. You actively went out there to help people, and wow. So
Yeah.
many years on. So how many years until the Lotus Flower actually began to make a huge difference?
So this is where people's patience have to come in, because I was very realistic.
Yeah, because
about
people
what
would
was-
assume it's easy.
Yeah, they assume it's easy because it's now become successful. They don't realize all the years of hard work, all the years of rejection, all the closed doors, all the who are you? Like all of that. They don't see any of that. They just see the success and they're like, oh, how did you get to this point? So it started in my living room with absolutely no money, and I didn't really have any connections. I wanted to use my connections in the UK. Didn't really have any. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to start this from scratch. So I registered it here, figured out what structure I could use to make it an organization that I can work from to implement projects out there. And went to one institutional donor and said, I need £25,000. We've done an assessment with a group of women and this is what they want to do. This is what I want to do. And they said, we'll give you 5,000 if you find 20,000. And they're going, but wait, you're a really rich organization. Why can't you give me 20,000? I can find 5.
Wait, logistically, that also doesn't make sense. How are you splitting up 5,000 between 20,000 people in another country? And these people need serious help.
Well, it was a very specific project, and it was a Sewing Sisters project, and we'd budgeted it. So we knew the budget breakdown. We knew that we needed £25,000 for that restricted project. So we knew that already. We'd done our proposals and our budget breakdown. But this organization that I'd gone to, I wanted 25,000 to start this project. But their response was, you need to go get 20,000 for us to give you the 5. And I thought, okay, fine. But I managed to find one donor who gave the 20,000 and then they gave the 5. And our first project started. And it was from there that I realized, okay, I just need to build it incrementally and slowly and recognize that it's going to take time. I had to work full time to pay myself and my child, look after, mortgage and bills and rent and everything. So I worked full time and I did Lotus on the side full time for about 3 years. And then I decided in 2018, I'm going full time. And I need to put everything in this to make it just grew and grew. Grew with a great team, grew with impact, grew with our projects. Like we've got, I'd say, quite good innovative projects. I had a comms and marketing background. So for me, I knew it was really important to kind of shape the story and be able to, and I've got a strong story, and the development of the Lotus Flower is part of my story. So it's a very strong why. And yeah, it just went from there.
I love it and admire it and
Thank
respect
you.
it and wholeheartedly
Thank you.
love and appreciate that you're here today, in all honesty.
Thank you.
How many more times can I say that today?
Appreciate it.
Before you started your story, I said I had something to say about you, but I just want to tell your story first because I wanted people to know the challenges that you've been through. And so many other Kurdish people have been through, because that day you weren't the only child on the bus, were you? I mean,
No.
of course you weren't, right?
No. Thing is, my story isn't unique.
No, it is to the vast majority of the world, but sadly...
Not to Kurds.
Yes.
So that's what I meant is, as a Kurd, it's not a unique story because every single person has gone through something, has experienced something. And actually, I encourage Kurds to speak up about their lived experience. I'm very passionate about people with lived experience, to share their stories and let the world know what's kind of happened to bring about change. So that is an important element. I just decided from early on, I'm going to do it.
I always say to people, I usually say this to creators, but I guess it applies here as well, but in a different context. The world deserves to see your craft. Like, whatever it is that you do, you'll find someone that will love and respect it as much as you do. You have to create it yourself. Yeah. Nothing's ever handed to you. But I think if it was handed to you, you'd appreciate it a bit less.
Yeah.
That's the strange thing about the human mind. We search for ease when we're left to our own devices, we search for ease, right? Because ease equates to survival.
Yeah.
However, we don't appreciate ease.
Yeah.
We kind of need that struggle to appreciate what's in front of us. But the point I was going to make about you was, as I was reading about you, listening to your content, researching, I saw someone and life had taken so much from you on so many different occasions. And I was left at one point while making all my notes, and there's pages here worth of notes. I was like, mashallah, this lady, this young girl at the time, had so much taken from her. And what she took from that was, I'm going to give back. Because for a lot of people, and not to make this sound like a joke, that could be like their villain origin story. This is where they like think that life resents them. Why did I go through this? Why did I go through that? And then Taban Shoresh was like, no, I'm not even going to go back to my regular life, which would be easier and help manage my mortgage and my son's life easier. I'm going to grind it out for many years, start the Lotus Flower, and inspire a generation of people and help tens of thousands of people.
Wow.
And hopefully soon that'll be like 100,000 people. Because what you're doing is monumental. And as a Kurd, I understand it more than most people because I know what my people go through.
Yeah, yeah.
And it breaks my heart, you know, to see us so underrepresented and not supported. So for you to be doing that.
Wow. Hearing that back is surreal.
That is the least you deserve.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, for me, I think being able to give back has helped me heal. It's been part of my healing journey. It gives me a purpose.
It makes your journey make sense, right? Like
completely.
Taban sat there like, why did I go through this? Why did my mother and father go through this? And then you've made it make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I don't know how spiritual people are that listen. But it'll be a mixed bag. But yeah, I was very, very, very ill from 2018 to like 2022, like extremely ill, nearly die. I nearly died 3 times. And nobody really thought I'd make it. But I had people that I'd never met, people in the camps that I'd never met, but knew me and knew my projects and knew that I'd help them. And word had got to them that I was ill. So people that I did not know were praying for me. And, you know, we have this thing, correct me if I'm wrong, in Islam, if somebody that you don't know prays for you, it's like, so it's really big. All those prayers collectively, honestly, just made me get through it. And even in hospital, I was in hospital for such a long time, in and out.
In the UK, right?
In the UK. But I was lucky that I can work from my laptop. So I have a full team in Kurdistan, but I manage stuff through a laptop. I travel. Like, I was so lucky I had that. I mean, people went crazy for being indoors over lockdown. I was indoors for about 3 years. 3 years.
To survive.
3 years trying to survive. Most of the time I was knocked out on drugs. I did not know what was happening. Painkillers to my eyeballs.
Not to make it overly sad or sadder than it is, but I can only imagine what effect that also had on your son.
It was a really difficult time for my family because they could visibly see that I was ill.
Well, you've been very open about it. I've seen you post these things.
Yeah. So now I do, and I do share about it. But for them at that time, especially my son as an only child and me being his only carer, it was quite scary for him because he could visibly see that I was really deteriorating. But he, you know, I had to get through it for him, for my mum. But what helped me get through it is having that structure with my work and my purpose. I would take my laptop into hospital. I'd work when I could, when I wasn't drugged up. I would have meetings when I could. And I couldn't keep food down. So I'd have a meeting, close the camera, maybe throw up and then turn the camera back on and say, I'm back. Or put notes on the door and say, I've got a meeting. Please don't disturb from this time to this time. And the doctors are like, what the hell? And I remember one particular moment where I was meant to wake up in ICU And the doctor came in and said, Taban, you might wake up in ICU. Please don't be scared. We just want to give you a warning. And I remember looking at her and going, are you joking? I've got a really important meeting tomorrow. I'm going to my meeting. And she laughed and went, if your meeting gets you through tonight, then you can have as many meetings as you want. But it did. I didn't end up in me. My purpose and my work and the prayers from other people that I don't know, honestly, just made me survive.
I would call that turning pain into purpose.
That's exactly what I do.
And also, do you accept volunteers?
So for Lotus, yes.
Abroad?
So abroad we no, because I have a rule. I have a rule for Kurdistan and local, which is I only hire locally. That's part of my impact, is that to give back to the local community. And if somebody from abroad wants to go back and volunteer, obviously they have to go through the volunteering process, but A, they need to cover their own expenses because we're a small charity. We don't have spare funds for that. And B, they need to leave a skill with the community. They need to leave something behind that the community benefits from. And I don't mean just financially. Like I mean, like for example, setting up a podcast or whatever it is, it's a skill that they leave behind. So that's the only way that I would accept international volunteers going back there. But we try not to encourage it because I believe there's an abundance of youth there that really want to make use of volunteering. So I encourage that.
They also need something to do and believe in and a purpose.
Yeah, so
Will
for
you
me,
accept volunteers here?
So volunteers, well, we're actually looking for volunteers in Hastings at the moment. Volunteers remotely, yeah. We're always looking for ways. I think with my social media, I'm going to start sharing ways people can kind of give back to charities without donating. So if you follow me on social media, then you'll kind of see I'm going to start a series of showing people if you've got this particular skill or this is what you do in your role, then actually you could help in these different ways. And it's not just about donating money. So volunteers are always needed. Therapy Beyond Borders was actually born out of the Lotus Flower because of the mental health needs. I haven't really fully launched that yet, but the idea and premise around it is to make mental health more accessible to underrepresented groups and vulnerable groups. You know, therapy, I think, is available mostly for those that can afford it. And that's so sad. And I believe that's really sad. And I want to figure out a way of making it accessible for those that can't afford it or can't reach it, and breaking down those borders. So keep an eye out for that. I would say the best way to keep an update on all these things is to follow me on social media, and you'll get an abundance of updates on various projects.
I will attach all your social media below. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've just started a YouTube channel.
And listen, by the time this is out as well, a lot of your other videos will also be out on a YouTube channel.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be on here. Thank you.
We are very happy to hear from you. So, like I said, I will attach all of Taban's socials and information, including links to the Lotus Flower, all below. Thank you. Take care. Enjoy. Like, comment, share. I really want you guys to actually share this one. I don't usually ask that, but I do think the world deserves to hear the story. So take care, everybody, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, that was brilliant.